It's stage 6 of Giro d'Italia, 169 kilometres from Moala de Bari to Margherita di Savoia, and two riders have escaped from the peloton in the early stages. Jack Bobridge of the Blanco squad at the front here in the black, white and blue outfit, and along with him his fellow countryman Cameron Worf of the Cannondale squad. These riders riding a decent tempo and opened up a significant gap on the peloton, led behind, as you can see. We just got a few broken images of Amiga Pharma Quickstep, who have taken responsibility for setting the tempo, and a lot of pressure. I mean, 4:18 now, the gap between the leaders. It had gone up over 6 minutes, so obviously the Amiga Pharma Quicksteps, you can see they have it lined out there, so they're not about letting the Breakaway get too much of a gap. They're going to control it all day, Sean.
Yes, I think that will be the case, and to control this breakaway of two men is not going to be a difficult one for Omega Pharma Quickstep. And if they had, been working it out back in the bunch in the start, just to allow the minimum of riders get away, they've done a really good job today, because it is going to be an easier task for them. Where if there is a big group of riders, 6-8 riders up front, well then you have to use up a lot of your men, maybe too early in the day, and then again in the final kilometres, the final 10-15 kilometres, you're missing a number of riders there, so they should be able to control this one with comfort. And of course it is a stage made for the sprinters, pan flat. They will come through the finish area a number of times, so they will get an idea what the running is like. Lovely conditions again, lovely conditions today compared to the last number of days, and the riders will be looking forward to that, because one day in the rain, 2 days in the rain, okay, but if it goes on and on, it affects some of the riders as well. In the general classification, men don't like the wet conditions every day, and of course there's always the danger with the wet streets. It makes it much more risky.
A lot of extra pressure, of course, on the sprinters' teams today, though, Sean, because it's been meagre pickings really for the sprinters so far in the Giro. By this time they would have expected to have had 3 or 4 opportunities, but they've only had one clean opportunity for a regular, if that's the word, bunch sprint.
Yes, in a big 3-week tour, normally in the first week you get much more opportunities, but unfortunately this year the race with the hills leading into the finish, or the uphill finishes, not a lot there for the sprinters, so they're going to really any opportunity that comes down, they're going to take it. And especially for Mark Cavendish, some of the real sprinters that cannot get over the hills like we've had in the past 2 days, they are going to be really pushing for it. The team is going to be really motivated to get him into the final in a position where he can go for this famous sprint he's got in the final 200 metres. And then you have the guys who were up there yesterday, Degenkolb and a lot of other ones. They will still be there today, but also they can get over the style of climb we had yesterday, but there will be a lot of pressure on the real big sprinters that have difficulty getting over the climbs, because their opportunities are minimal in this race.
Cameron Worf is out front for the Cannondale team. He's been working, as I said, in the service of Viviani so far in this race. Indeed, Cameron Worf, I should talk about him a bit, actually, because he's got an excellent blog and he's really been suffering. He's had a cold, so the team have given him a bit of a pass, but for all that he's gone up and collected bottles a little bit. It's quite an entertaining read if you can find it online. And one interesting thing he said is that he takes, in today's blog, he said he takes an entire stage's worth of food with him right from the start, because he doesn't want the hassle and the aggro of having to get anything from the car, specifically for himself, or indeed if he manages to miss the musette at the feed zone, then he's happy enough that he'll definitely at least be fed all the way to the finish. Doesn't need the hassle and aggro, and he does grab a bag if he can, but it's not priority for him. So many other riders wouldn't like to have the extra weight in their pockets, but Cameron Worf says, well, I carry it in training, I might as well carry it in the race. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. As I say, he has been sick, but seems to have recovered, obviously feeling a lot better, so very impressive recovery from him, and we'll see how he's getting on in the break. At Righteous Fake is asking, do the cyclists get bothered by the exhaust fumes of the motorcycles ahead of them, or the cars, especially on the slow mountain stages? Does it ever bother you, Sean?
Yes, well, when you're on the big mountain stages and on the steeper climbs, when you're going at a slow pace, and all these motorbikes hovering around, TV and photographers, it is very uncomfortable, and there's a lot of fumes coming from the motorbikes. And when the warm conditions, that is the real difficult time, when it's 35 degrees and the fumes. It's very, very difficult, and it's something that I always start to suffer with. I never liked the motorbikes around, but that's part of the race. They have to do a job as well. The TV cameras got to be there, and the photographers, of course, are allowed. Just a number of photographers are allowed at each time on the front of the group. A group of 3-4 photographers, and then they change over. So it's it's limited, but it's still when you're suffering, and if you're a rider who is in the general classification, or you're a favourite and you start to get into trouble, that is more difficult again, because they really focus in you for quite a number of minutes.
And back with the officials, or is that the medical car? No, it is one of the officials' cars. A little bit of a conversation going on. Meanwhile, up front, the Omega Pharma Quick Step team have taken it on. We've seen this before. We saw it on the first stage, that they were happy to set the pace. They didn't ask for any help, and they certainly weren't offered a whole lot of help until the last 5 kilometres, when they struggled to control it. Having said that, Française de Jeu have sent a man up front, give a little bit of a dig out, and that'll be great relief to Cavendish and Co. No Nasser Bouhanni, of course, of Française de Jeu. That's Brian Bulgak, who we saw in action in the break yesterday, back with the Lotto Belisol team car. And the Cannondale's next in line, Elia Viviani. A question earlier about who's the fastest sprinter out there. It really is tough to look beyond Cavendish. The suggested names were Sagan, Cavendish, Greipel, Degenkolb, Goss. Who's the fastest of them all? Who's the best sprinter? You could probably throw in the likes of Marcel Kittel. Arnaud Demar's going well. Viviani, of course, in this race. How can you possibly look beyond Cavendish? He's got the record, and his performance on the first stage, well, he was left in a difficult situation, having to close a gap late on when Stegemans had his mechanical failure, mechanical glitch, and left Cavendish having to close a gap within the last few hundred, well, what, 300 or 400 metres, and then having to go again to win the stage. Had that second kick, the true mark of a sprinter. Hard to see beyond Cavendish as the greatest sprinter at the moment. Is he the greatest of all time? That's the real question. 169 kilometres for the riders today. 2 riders out front. Cannondale on the front. And it looks like the pace is fairly hectic up front, to say the least. Mark Cavendish on the back of the Cannondales, where the Omega Pharma Quick Steps. A little bit of a split here. Is this not an unusual development, you'd have to say, Sean? They trying to pull a little bit of a fast one. Cavendish is alive to the danger, heading towards the intermediate sprint point. Yes, 2 riders out front, so there's still bonus seconds and bonus points, of course, for the points classification. The intermediate sprints classification is also up for grabs, and the interest that is being shown by Mark Cavendish indicates that he is going for the points competition today. Doesn't quite get the 3rd place, but 4th across the line for Mark Cavendish. And one little effort just to keep his attention. No sign of any Omega Pharma Quick Steps around to help him in that situation. They'd been setting the pace on the front, and marked absent as Cannondale set it up nicely. Viviani it was. Well, we wait to get full confirmation. Looked like Elia Viviani getting 3rd across the line behind the 2 Aussies out front, Bobridge and Worf. Would have been a little less concerned with it. And that little bit of activity for the Peloton lined them out and reminded them that they're very much in a race, as if they needed reminding. That's Gil Martinez at the back for the Androni squad. Of course, he was in the break all day yesterday, so he'll have heavy legs. He doesn't need this sort of thing. And after that little bit of a skirmish, it's left up to the Omega Pharma Quicksteps, who work their way back to the front. Gianluca Brambilla, who takes it up for them. Burbridge and Worf. Funny enough, Worf's blog yesterday, he said he grabbed a Coke can and was hoping to get, he just got one gulp out of it, and this was going to be his big treat for the day. And of course they came to a speed bump, and he just got one gulp and had to throw it away. So it's a crushing disappointment from them, but he had plenty of time to get all of the Coke in there. And there's the man that we saw in the wars on the first day, crashed all on his own, Laurent Pichon. That's the thing about stage racing, you've got to do your recovering on the bike stage by stage, and that's the quality of a real stage racer, that you're able to shrug off these little illnesses. And you can be sure that that crash will have affected Laurent Pichon, because he's got to repair his body, and that takes a lot of energy, as well, of course, as this racing. Pichon doing a great job for Française de Jeux, along with the other Omega Pharma Quicksteps. Omega Pharma Quickstep on the front as the riders head towards Margherita di Savoia on their way in stage 6 of Giro d'Italia. And the Omega Pharma Quicksteps working hard for Mark Cavendish, who they believe has a great chance of delivering them their second stage success of the race at the conclusion of today's activities. Two riders out front, Jack Burbridge for the Blanco squad, and his fellow Aussie Cameron Worf of the Cannondale team. They've got a handy advantage at the moment, but they're not being let off the reins too much. Jack Burbridge, just 23 years of age, and much is expected of him. He's already made his mark in many ways. Took the Australian Road Cycling the Road Race Championships in 2011. And the Garmin team working to make things easy for Ryder Hagedal on his cruise towards the conclusion of this race. And there's confirmation of the first sprint. Elia Viviani did get up just ahead of Mark Cavendish and behind Worf and Burbridge, who would have been less concerned with the order of affairs across the line there. Points competition currently led by Luca Paolini, the overall race leader. He's got 35 points to John Degenkolb's 30. So Degenkolb has the honour of wearing the red jersey of points classification leader in today's stage.
And I think it's an indication for the points classification jersey outright. When we see Mark Cavendish having a go there, it means that there's a bit of interest there. Viviani also, of course, you know, from the Cannondale team, he's up there, and they're all up there at the moment. There's nothing in it between, you know, a lot of the big sprinters. Viviani is 7th, Cavendish is in 4th position, 28 for Cavendish, and Viviani at 24. So, you know, they're very tightly matched, and I suppose it's going to be interesting once again when you look at the points classification in the Giro in the past number of years. It seems to be the general classification men are up there winning it outright, so maybe they're making the calculation that you have to go for these intermediate sprints as well, and anytime there's an opportunity to pick up points, because in the end of the race, as we all remember from last year, you know, Mark Cavendish just lost by 1 point in the end of the race to Joaquim Rodriguez.
Well, that little bit of activity heading through the intermediate sprint point for the bunch has paired another minute off the advantage of the two leaders up front. There is a separate intermediate sprints competition. Taylor Phinney seems to be enjoying himself out there, and is he envious of that Giro helmet? Phinney's sick, actually. He doesn't show it there, but he said that he's got running a bit of a temperature, not feeling great, and a little bit concerned. And Phinney would be one of the big favourites for the time trial on Saturday. It would be his first big goal of this race. He wore the Maglia Rosa 1 year ago, and his descriptions of his efforts to make it through the mountains and survive and beat the time limit and make it to the end of his first Giro d'Italia were really very entertaining indeed, and gave you a little bit of a chill and a thrill, I think, really, because clearly he really has a sense of what's important about cycling, and a very entertaining character, Taylor Phinney. But he's a little bit sick, and that's doesn't bode well for Saturday, does it?
No, and last year he had a real good start to the race, getting stage victory, ProTour victory, and winning, getting the pink jersey. But then he had a lot of problems, crashes. He crashed in the team time trial. He got pulled into a crash as well at the finish area, so he had a real difficult time last year, and it looked like that he was getting ready for the individual time trial in a number of days. He was on the rear of the peloton a lot in the last couple of days, and I was thinking, he's just taking it easy there now, spare as much energy as possible, and get into a real good position, get into real good form for the individual time trial. But if he's got a cold, well, that just takes 2-3% off you, and that is the difference between winning and losing these individual time trials. And if it gets better, well, I think there's time to do that. But if it starts getting a little bit worse, well, then it's very difficult to perform at your best when you get a little bit of cold. And the last number of days, of course, we see the weather conditions, shower, then it dries off a bit, you put on your rain jacket, then you take it off again. It's real weather for getting a chill.
Yeah, the physical ability to recover from these little difficulties, and indeed for the sheer arduous efforts of beating yourself up day after day, is a talent in itself. Some riders are absolutely brilliant on one day, but they can't get beyond a few days of racing because they don't have the ability to recover in the way that other riders do.
Yes, well, that's what makes a great stage race rider. They just recover so well, and they can do just 3 weeks of racing. And you see the time trial at the end of a 3-week tour. I think an example last year, and I've been reading about Bradley Wiggins, he was talking about the final time trial last year in the Tour of France, the way he performed. He knew he was going to be really good for the Olympics because they finished so strong, and that's what you have to be first of all. That's part of the recipe to become a good 3-week tour rider. You have to be able to do it all, of course, ride the time trials, do the mountain stages, but the recovery is so important, because if you're not recovering well, then you're going to pay the price. And the weather conditions as well, you go up and down mountains, even the Tour of France in July, you can get real warm conditions for a week, but suddenly you go into the mountains, the weather change a bit, and it can get so cold up there. You climb up for 15 kilometres, then you have a descent of 15-20 kilometres in very cold conditions, so the body has to be real strong, and that is a problem with a lot of riders. They get sick so easy, and especially when you're in real good form, that's the time you're more vulnerable to getting something, catching a cold. But some riders are just so strong there, they can race in all sorts of conditions and they never get any cold, and that is also real important as a bike rider.
Yeah, they're at their most vulnerable because they're doing the most amount of work at that point. They've reached a peak, and I guess their body fat percentages are down around sort of 3 to 5% for some of these riders, and well, that's just taking it to the absolute limit. Another intermediate sprint coming in quick succession, just about 10 kilometres apart, and the two riders up front, Cameron Wurf in the front, wearing the green outfit of Cannondale, accompanied by Jack Bobridge of the Blanco team. That's not contested between the two of those, so it's Wurf first across the line ahead of Bobridge. And it'll be interesting to see
how much more time they will lose.
Yeah, indeed, yes, yeah, because it is pretty busy behind. Cannondale go to the front again, they've taken it up. I suppose these little distractions take the heat off Omega Pharma Quick-Step a little bit, but if they're placing an emphasis on the competition, and it looks as if Cavendish has been left to his own devices, he's just going to use the Cannondale train and see can he come off the wheel of Viviani.
Yes, well, I think he's sitting down there at the end of the Cannondale train, but he also has some teammates around him. We can see two at least teammates with him there, but it'll be interesting to see how the other teams going to go for it here, because we can see Radio Shack also moving up here, so possibly a bit more, a few more riders contesting the sprint, and it's making a little bit of interest here because it was getting a little bit quiet. With two riders in front, it's easy to control, but this is causing a little bit of a stir.
Great crowds out lining the roads, as you might expect. The Puglia tifosi enjoying the scene in the sunshine. 24 degrees centigrade at the finish line. 13 kilometres of a northeast wind facing the riders. Cavendish looking cool, calm and collected. Danilo De Luca has been very involved in the action. Back in the team car, the Vinnie Fantini rider. Not to be Vinnie Fantini's outfit, not to be confused with the Cannondale squad. It's a darker green hue for them. There's a bit of a debate going on Twitter. Brian Smith, who's ridden this race, of course, the Eurosport commentator, is asking, oh, let's get a side of the intermediate sprint as they come to the line. Just look down for a moment, and once again, Cavendish missed out. And is Cavendish just keeping his powder dry, or the leg's not feeling too good?
Well, it's surprising that he didn't really go for it. He just followed Viviani again, and not really, looking to me, not really concessions at 100%. Just following her there, and I don't think that he was really giving it his best effort there.
Just over 90 kilometres to go. That's the scene over Barletta, I should say. Barletta, the home of one of Italy's greatest athletes, the Olympic 200 metres winner from 1980, Pietro Minea, who very sadly died just a couple of months ago, the early age, 61 years of age. And there is the signs up. He's well remembered in this region, set a world record that lasted for a long time in the 200 metres, and I believe it's still the European record at 200 since 1979, since 1980, something like that. It's an amazing record. Pietro Minea, great hero, and well remembered in this region. Yeah, I was just talking about that debate. Brian Smith is asking who was the first Australian to win a stage of Giro d'Italia and what team was he riding for, and it seems to be raging out there. Graham Healy suggests that it might have been Michael Wilson in 1982 riding for Alfa Lum. Can't say I remember. Dave Cunliffe is asking, why does Steve Cummings ride at the back of the peloton all the time? Indeed, he does spend quite a bit of time there. I guess it's a free ride, isn't it? I mean, there's less stress because you're not worrying about riders behind you.
Well, I don't think it's the best place to be, first of all, as we see the tail end of the peloton here with Finney on the rear. But it'll be interesting to see if he's a bit further back, see if he loves to sit there. And it's a place where you can relax a bit because, you know, you can see what's happening out in front, especially when it's going slow, it's safe enough. But when the race hots up, it's not a place to be because, you know, riders can leave a gap open. You find yourself in a small group with riders who are sick or who are just not recovering and getting very weak in the race, and you're wide open to that. But when you're up in the middle of the group, for example, in the top 40-50, well, you're in there in the middle, and if there's a crash, when you're relaxed and when everybody's relaxed, and you know, we see them there on a number of occasions, they're talking together, it's very easy to get tangled up in the crash, and I think you would get tangled up a bit more there. So it probably is a bit safer down the rear, but still it's not a place to be. But he just likes that position. He always seems to be sitting around there.
Well, it's his BMC teammate Taylor Finney that is occupying the tail gunner's position at the moment. Finney very much in recovery mode, trying to look after himself and see can he get himself right for that individual time trial. 55 kilometres of racing with a big kick in the end coming on Saturday afternoon, and that's going to be the focus for all the leading contenders, not least Bradley Wiggins, and that'll be the first test really, depending on how much time the likes of Vincenzo Nibali loses to Bradley Wiggins et al., then we'll have an idea of whether he can be a real contender. Whereas Ryder Hagedal going to finish against Bradley Wiggins. Now up front they've fanned out across the road a little bit as Mega Pharma Quicksteps make their way back towards the front to try and get things settled and organised. Just under 90 kilometres to go as the riders make their way towards Margherita di Savoia. Both intermediate sprints, no mountains classification points for them to worry about today. The break for the riders, we'll take one as well. Join us after. Stage 6, From Wala de Bari to Margherita di Savoia, a total of 169 kilometres. They've got 87 of those still remaining. And there's a few riders on the wrong side of that split. Wondering, will they ever make it back in? And a nice little artistic shot of the two breakaway riders, Jack Bobridge and Cameron Wurf. Jack Bobridge of the Blanco team, and Cameron Wurf. Bobridge 199th at 55 minutes and 14 seconds. I think it's fair to say you don't even count the seconds at that point, do you really? He's not an overall contender, not a worry, and they'll be happy and content enough to see him out front. Cameron Wurf also about a half an hour down. He's been recovering from illness. And those two riders have other responsibilities and other duties, and this is an opportunity for them in the sunshine. And those three riders, I wonder, are they ever going to get back in?
Well, that's what they're hoping. They're hoping there will be an open in the barrier, because I think they're starting to worry a little bit, and you know,
it's a shame we have to climb off and clamber over the barrier.
We could very well see that, because if it continues on, they're starting to look around here, and it doesn't look like there's an opening coming up soon.
Oh, I bet it seemed like a good idea at the time, going the wrong side of that last roundabout or whatever it was. Yeah. It happened in Stage Tour of Turkey, I think, recently, didn't it? That quite a sizable chunk of the riders went to the right-hand side of an obstacle close to the finish. And all the artistic shots are coming out now, aren't they? But yeah, those riders missed out, and there's some serious contenders. This is a little bit of a less serious situation, but well, they're going to have to figure out something.
Yes, it's not a serious situation at the moment, because 86 kilometres to the finish. But if it happened in the last 20 kilometres, and you had to dismount and get over the barrier, well then it would be a disaster. And where here they can do that if it eventually happens that they have to stop and just climb over.
Yeah, it's a long straight road for these riders heading towards the feed zone.
And they'll get no feed if they're out there.
Well, that's an issue. Yeah.
You can throw the Musette across over the barrier.
That'd be a good shot. Fraught with danger, I suggest. 2 minutes and 21 seconds, and it's coming down. There's a bit of a concern. Suspicion is that after the feed zone, when things tidy up a little bit, that they'll have opened up their advantage, and they're not choosing to take a Musette. I suppose for these riders, they're not on feeding duty for the rest of the team, and it's handy enough to get a bottle from the car, so they don't really need to pick up food.
Well, I think on the stage that we've got today, it's still a flat stage, and all the team cars are there, so it's not a problem later on. I think the thing on the mind at the moment is how are they going to get back on the right side of the road here, because it looks like it just goes on and on, this barrier, and it's going to be an interesting one to see. We can see that they're still just on the other side, and if there's a split here where the road just goes apart, well then they'll have to just stop and try and climb over.
Plus they're having to do all the work. They're not getting any shelter at all. There's only a few of them in there.
And surprising they're not getting a bit of a slagging from the other riders, because they're riding out there, the three of them, and normally when that happens, if you make that mistake at this point, the other riders start making fun of you, and they start giving comments, as we can see here. It still goes on.
This could go all the way to Margherita di Savoia. It would appear as if Michael Wilson is the answer to that question, so well done to Graham Healy. That's the little Twitter debate that's been raging, or at least at BT Adelaide says that the answer is Michael Wilson.
I'm not too sure on that, because there was some Australian riders in the early 80s.
Certain Phil Anderson was pretty good.
Yes, but that was the early 70s. There was some riders in Italy. I cannot remember the name, but quite a good rider. And from what I remember, I was under the impression that he did win a stage in Giro. So that would be 10, 15 years before Michael Wilson.
Yeah. Neil Buckley pointing out it is funny that Steve Cummings is on the front now. We have to record that. Cummings is on the front, working hard. Cameron Wurf, 2 wins since turning pro 2007, second appearance in Giro d'Italia, and of course he was on the attack on day one as well, wasn't he? He was out front, so he's certainly enjoying the first week of the Giro, and the Peloton crawls to a halt. And there'll be a relief indeed for the riders. They're not racing through the feed zone, because that can lead to lots of tension and potential for crashes. But this is a much more sedate. Now the riders have missed their feed. It looks as if those they turn around at the road coming back to get their Musette. It's hilarious. They're still out there. It doesn't look like the most difficult barrier to climb over. And it's the perfect time to do it, because the Peloton have slowed.
Yeah,
this says one of them is stopped. I think it's one of the Vinny Fantini riders, is it?
Yes, we can see the riders that are at the other side on our right at the moment, but on the rider's left-hand side, they're actually oncoming cars coming there. So I think they've decided to stop and try and climb off the barrier, but not an easier barrier. We can see, it must be 4.5 feet high, and it looks to be quite a wide one as well. So it will be a little bit of a climb for some of them, and if they're non-climbers, it will be a bit difficult for them.
It wouldn't be good for the sprinters trying to get over that one now. Amiga Pharma Quick-Step and Française de Jeu take responsibility for the pace setting. Astana there too. Vincenzo Nibali being protected by his team. That'll be the major focus for the Astana team today. Less concerned, one would expect, with the sprint finish, and more about keeping Nibali out of trouble. Spike Pitt wants to know, can you finish on someone else's bike or a spectator's bike at a finish on a stage? I think that's a little unlikely to happen. Although you certainly can finish on someone else's bike. You can grab a bike from neutral service. Happened a few years ago on the Tour, didn't it? With German rider Jens Vogt. Yeah, big crash at the top of one of the big mountains, and ended up on a bike that the saddle was about a foot lower than he needed to be. He said he felt like being on a kid's bike, but it did the job. He was on it for a while, managed to get back in the action. They're not often used, the bikes from neutral service, because usually it's pretty much worth waiting for your own team car, so you get the right bike, the right size. Someone's asking if they have if all the riders have the same cassette as their team leader, so that if the team leader has to take a bike, then at least they'll all be on the same gears. Well, to be honest, there aren't huge differences between the cassettes these days, because they've got 11 sprockets, so there's plenty of opportunity for variety. They get pretty much everything they need. It's only when it comes to hills like the Zoncolon, etc., where they have to make decisions about what sort of gearing they're working on. And it's really, if your team leader, you might have the same cassette if you were a similar size to him, and if you were detailed to stay close to him, and you might have to give your bike to him, but not everyone in the team will be the same size as the team leader, so it's less likely to be an issue from that point of view. Meanwhile, the riders up front, just over 50 miles to go. So Cameron Worth on the front for the Cannondale team, and Jack Bobridge of Blanco, both of Australia, and doing Aussie proud today in the Puglia sunshine. And Damien Barrett's pointing out that Bouhanni from Française de Jeu is wearing the number 100 jersey because number 108 has been retired. Of course, this is the anniversary of the death of Wouter Wayland 2 years ago. In tragic circumstances, Wouter Wayland crashed towards the conclusion of stage 3. And such a sad moment for the Giro d'Italia and for everyone in the cycling family. And so today we remember Wouter Wayland. Well, the bunting is out in force, as you might expect, for the riders of the Giro d'Italia, making their way north towards the first important rendezvous of the race for the overall contenders. This an important opportunity for the sprinters. They've had relatively meager pickings so far, and there'll be a lot of pressure on those teams, and the pressure seems to be condensed into fewer and fewer stages for them in these races, so well, that can lead to lots of tense moments towards the conclusion. Bit of news in the last couple of days that Richie Porte has re-signed with Team Sky for 2 years. Well, the Tasmanian's certainly been much in demand after his Paris-Nice victory this year. And great battling second place to Chris Froome and Criterium International as well, also helped to make his name. Several teams were rumoured to be interested in gaining the signature of Richie Porte. Green Edge, BMC, Omega Pharma, Quickstep, rumoured to have shown some interest. And I think it'll be a relief for Dave Brailsford, and indeed for Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome, that Richie Porte has re-signed with the team, especially given all this talk about Rigoberto Urán being likely to leave the team at the end of the year.
Yes, well, Richie Porte is an important part of the team. We will see him in the Tour of France this year, and he is, just a huge talent. He's proved that himself. He's, improving every year, and winning Paris-Nice this year. He is a rider that looks like in the future a big tour potential, a big tour winner, and it's certainly good for Sky, because there would be a number of teams that would be interested in his service, certainly, because when he's of that quality and that level.
Yeah, good news for Sky, and good news for Richie Porte. Do you think it may, he's obviously been allowed to target certain races. I think Paris-Nice was an important development for him with the team, because for a lot of teams he would be their GC man. I mean, he's a fantastic domestique for Team Sky, but are you surprised that he doesn't have ambitions elsewhere, loftier ambitions? I mean, he said after Criterium International, particularly the second stage, where they kind of they worked it so well, he was second wheel to Chris Froome. He just let the gap go. Froome got enough of a gap, and the other is a pretty good problems for Team Sky, as we mentioned them. It's Salvatore Puccio, the former Maglia Rosa of this race, in his first Giro d'Italia. No harm done for him, and he gets wheel and gets back into the action without any difficulty, and he'll be back up through the cars very shortly. But Richie Porte, he said after that Criterium International that he truly believed that he could be a contender because of how he performed on that stage. He just lit the afterburners himself a little bit after Chris Froome had left and disappeared up the road, and he himself was able to leave a quality group without any difficulty, and that gave him a lot of extra confidence. So clearly he's a man for the future.
Yes, well, of course, his Paris-Nice victory, first of all, that proves that he's on the road to winning a big tour, and he's got all the qualities. He's got the time trialing ability. He's a great climber, and we see the way he can perform in the long races. So he's certainly a team smaller teams would love to have, because he would be the leader, and he would be a good general classification man for them. But of course, with Sky, we did hear as well that he's going to be left target the Giro, the Vuelta, and that's what he said. Like, he will be able to look at the Vuelta first, and then just go on from there.
Laurent Pichon takes it up for Française de Jeu, with the gap holding steady at 2.5 minutes to the riders up front. So it looks as if they're going to try and hold it at 2.5 minutes. So the bunch not taking any risks, with just two riders out front, working away into a slight headwind. And with such a small group, you'd imagine you could give them a lot more time, but 2.5 minutes they seem to be satisfied with. I think Omega Pharma Quickstep may have had a word with a few teams and suggested that maybe you might like to actually contribute to the pace setting a little bit earlier in the stage.
Well, they would always try, and they would just look at the teams who have got real big sprinters here, but again, yesterday Omega Pharma did not work with them, and but they had reason, because Cavendish did not make it to the final sprint. But they would certainly be negotiations going with the director sportif, and they would be talking to Cavalcade, well, can you put a man up there? But today is not the problem, because with two men out in front, although the two Australians, real powerhouses out there, they never allowed them the advantage with any hope of going on to the finish here. As we can see, 77 kilometres, 2:35 at the moment. They need to have allow them 12 minutes, and then it could become a danger point. So at the moment, there's very few teams riding, as we can see. Omega Pharma Quickstep and Française de Jeu, the other ones, Argos Shimano, they did a lot of riding yesterday, but they got the result that they wanted, and they were able to relax a bit today. So it will be interesting to see, will we see somebody who's not, really contributing at all up there from the sprinters teams? And you have guys like Vinny Fantini, like Chichi, he's sometimes he can put up a great sprint, so we could see a surprise again today, but hard to see anybody beating Mark Cavendish, because stage one, when he got to the finish there and he had a little bit of a problem in the final 500-600 metres, still rectified it and won the sprint, so I think it's going to be difficult for anybody unless Cavendish gets a little bit boxed in, and that's always something you're hoping, if you're not one of the better sprinters in the top 3 or 4 sprinters in the race, if you're a little bit off that, well, you stay up there and you're always hoping, well, those guys might get boxed in, you could get the opening and get a real good run. And in that case, we could see a surprise sprinter winning today.
Yeah, because that Amiga Pharma quick step lead-out train hasn't, the jury's still out on it, hasn't quite entirely gelled, has it? And didn't quite get it right on that first stage. It was a very unusual one. It was a late crash. There was a split in the peloton, very similar to what we saw yesterday as well, although there wasn't any rain involved. But Cavendish was able to rescue the team a little bit after. In fairness, they've done monumental amount of work during the day, so you've got to say that they're up for the contribution, but it didn't quite gel in terms of getting organised for the sprint. And of course there was that mechanical difficulty, as I mentioned, for Gert Stegemans on that occasion. So we've still yet to see Cavendish have the sort of lead-out train that he was comfortable with and used to with HTC Columbia a few years ago. We're talking about too about John Degenkolb and his chances for today. Could he make it a double? Former policeman, would you believe? Spent 6 years training as a policeman. He's still registered as a policeman. He says he's got like a 2-star rating as a policeman, so he's there. Need any marshalling
stopped by Degenkolb for doing too much speed.
Yeah. You'd have a reasonable complaint.
Well, you would not challenge him too much. You just accept your fine and just get on with it, because when you see the size of a man he is and the powerful guy he is, but he will be very much there today, and winning a stage already, that takes the pressure off, so you relax a bit in the final. You don't go for a little gap where it's very, very tight, and sometimes that's a good way to be. When you're a little bit relaxed, sometimes you can win other ones, and he will definitely give it a go here today again. Yeah,
the monkey's off his back, you might say. His first victory of the season, surprisingly enough. 19th of his career. His 6th Grand Tour stage victory, to go with the 5 from the Vuelta a España last year. Miano Caruso of the Cannondale team going to work his way back up through the group. Degenkolb said it was a perfect uphill finish for him. And no surprise he was able to do that.
Surprising that Degenkolb hadn't had a victory. I thought he got one in the earlier part of the season, one of those races.
I believe it was his first win of the year. Yeah, he had a bit of a difficult classic season, I know. Had to retire from Trentino, or was it? He had to retire from one of them with muscle problems. And then he struggled through, I think he DNF'd to Paris-Roubaix.
Not many hills on this run-in, as we can see here. Pan flat. Certainly a day for the sprinters to dream.
No, he doesn't look like the sort of guy who'd get over the hills well, but he certainly does, doesn't he? He does. He's able to generate the power for just about long enough to get over those short, sharp shocks. Well, that was a 4-kilometre hill yesterday. The last 2 kilometres of that were around about 9%. Just a bridge too far for Mark Cavendish, but perfect for John Degenkolb. And who would rule against it? Definitely a man to watch out for towards the conclusion of today's affairs. And it was a double success, of course, for Team Argus Shimano, because Lucy Garner sprinted to her maiden pro victory on stage 1 of the Tour of Chongming Island. World Junior Champion, heading in Chloe Hosking for that breakthrough victory. As we see riders making their way back up through the cars. That's George Bennett of the Radio Shack team. Winding his way through the cars and past other riders. Things relatively relaxed in the peloton at the moment, as they just let the gap slacken a little bit and let it move out to just under 3 minutes. after all that activity we saw up front. There's Nasser Bohani. Victory in Paris-Nice earlier this season, wearing the skin suit of national road race champion of France. Nasser Bohani en Française de Jeu. Matteo Rabottini, the winner of the mountains classification of last year's Giro d'Italia, making his way back up through the group as the riders wind their way towards Margherita di Savoia in stage 6 of the Giro d'Italia. There's Rigoberto Urán calling for the car. We'll get a shot on the other side of the bunch of Franco Pellizotti, the reigning Italian road race champion, who's made his comeback after suspension with Androni Giocattoli. Pellizotti looking very relaxed. And Maglia Rossi, you see him on the right-hand side of the group there. Luca Paolini just giving the thighs a little shake, so legs will be starting to get a little bit tired. They've still got a couple of weeks to go, of course, but they've done a lot of racing already. Got a tweet yesterday suggesting that Cadel Evans could be targeting the points jersey. He's currently well up, of course. He's third in the points classification. He's joint second with John Degenkolb, who's wearing that jersey today. They're 5 points behind Luca Paolini, so it's certainly a potential opportunity for Cadel Evans. But Sean, is it too early to even imagine targeting that at the moment? He certainly is an overall contender, and he wouldn't admit to even thinking about anything less at the moment, even if he was.
Well, yes, it's surprising. We've seen him up there very much to the front, but is that to try and get some of the points for that classification, or is it just to stay out of danger for general classification? It's early days to say yet, you know, what exactly he's targeting. I think for the moment it looks like that he's staying out of danger, although he did 2 days ago, he put up a very good sprint, but we did see, you know, it was a real difficult sprint as well. He was in a good position, and then we had the paved last 250 metres, and it was very difficult when battling one. They had a big fight to get to the line. On the last 100 metres, everybody was just struggling to make it to the line, so I'd not take too much from it yet. But when you look at the points classification the last number of years, you know, Rodriguez winning last year, then Scarponi in 2011, Cadel Evans in 2010, so, you know, he's done it before. And Menshoff, you go along through the list, and you have to go back a good while. Benatti won it in 2008, Pataki in 2007, Bettini won it in 2005, 2006, so, you know, Bettini a very good all-rounder. He was able to get over the median mountain, so it's a lot of the guys who can climb well, general classification riders who have won in the last couple of years, so it's possible that he's just picking up a small number of points when the occasion presents itself without having to make too much of an effort.
Bradley Wiggins 6th in the standings, just 34 seconds down, and very much in contention. All that talk of the 17 seconds lost a couple of days ago has been forgotten at this point. It's honours even between the leading contenders, little to choose between them. Might have been a bit irritating at the time, but you can be pretty sure that he'll have shrugged that off and won't be thinking about any difficulties there. He's right in contention heading into the time trial in a couple of days from now. Today, of course, is a day to be got through, and just wants to make sure that he can stay up there and stay out of trouble. That's the extraordinary Andrea Casteldelmonte. Castle built in 1240, commissioned by Frederick II of Hohenstaufen, and as with so many sites around this area, declared a World Heritage Site back in 1996. It's one of the famous symbols of Puglia, which, interestingly enough, appears on the 1 cent coin.
If you lived in that, you could train just to go by going around it.
It's big enough, it's like a velodrome, yeah. Wall of death. Up front, Jack Bobridge and Cameron Worf continue to do their work. 2:44, and they'll need to ride steadily and hard all the way. A futile activity, many say, but well, they're putting the colours out front. showing the sponsors' names. Speaking of which, someone has texted in asking why, or texted in, it's tweeted in to @DQ Sport is the handle, in case you're wondering. Why does Nasser Bouhanni not appear to have any advertising on his national champion skin suit? And it does seem pretty unbranded. I'm pretty sure Francis de Jeux is on it, but it looks fantastic,
yes,
doesn't it?
And that is Marc Madio. Actually, we had the question, and in Paris-Nice I remember speaking to some of the people from the FDJ team, and the question was there, and I was asking. Marc Madio said at the beginning of the year that he's not putting any sponsorship on the champion of France's jersey. He said in honour to the jersey, he said he's not putting any of the sponsorship on it, and it's something, that sports. First of all, if the sponsors agree with that, well then I suppose it's okay, but not a lot of the sponsors would be in the okay to that, because they would like to have their exposure and their name on a national champion jersey, especially the French one, which is a very important one to hold.
Yes, it is an interesting decision, and fair play to Francis de Jeux, because it does look absolutely fabulous without the sponsors branding, I think. Sometimes national champions' colours can be, greatly diluted is probably the phrase, by the sponsors. As we get a sight inside Castel del Monte. A little bit of something going on down there. I think most people are probably out watching the Giro, aren't they? Speaking of Marc Madio, actually, we've had another question in. With the retirement of Sir Alex Ferguson from Manchester United, is there any equivalent director sportive in cycling, Sean, that you can imagine that has a similar force of personality? Marc Madio in French cycling would perhaps be a contender?
Well, I think he would be a contender. From a point of being a forceful and letting his words being heard in a lot of occasions, and he's always been very forward-coming about different things, about the races, the doping problems we had for many years in cycling, and he was very strong on all of those subjects. From a results point of view, he hasn't got anything near Alex Ferguson, but coming from being a rider himself, winning 2 Paris-Roubaix, having a very good career, he's there a long time, and with the team, I think with the budget he's been working with in the earlier part of his career as well, that was the problem, that he was struggling to have some good riders, winners of races, because of his budget being limited.
The role of the director sportive is fundamental. It's absolutely vital. You obviously had many during your time, but most famously Jean de Gribaldi. Was he a big personality? Was he a hairdryer in the same manner that Alex Ferguson is caricatured?
Well, he was a big influence on my career, and first of all, I came from Ireland, from a country that cycling at that time it was pretty low key, and there weren't a lot of people to turn to there to talk to about how you should train and what way you should ride races. So I was, I suppose, green is the word when I came over to France, and certainly when my first year in professional in '77, and Gribaldi, he was, it was a shock to me, the training he was getting me to do, also the diet he put me on. That was the thing which I will always remember. Like, he said to me, first of all, well, you're too fat, you have to lose 2 stone over a period of time, and I was put on a very strict diet, and I think it was something that came into the sport 10 years later on the other teams.
So you had an early advantage in terms of diet?
Yes, certainly had.
Quick sight there of Francesco Chicchi, who will hope to be up there for Vinnie Fantini. Italia a little bit later on. He'll be showing those lurid day-glow yellow colours of the Vinnie Fantinis. Arua Vastana in shot there very briefly. Or was it Tanel Taggart? Wasn't it Tanel Taggart? Francis de Jeux back on the front. Sharing it, is that the diminutive figure of Gianluca Brambilla? In second place is Taylor Finney. Doesn't want any more camera. I'm riding at the back today, leave me alone. He's certainly an entertaining guy.
His teammate Adam Blight sitting on the rear there, so The BMC team are, controlling well on the rear at least for the moment, and they have been over the last number of days. But there is no problem at the moment to sit on the rear, because the way they're riding along, they're riding a very strong pace up front, and strong is the word, because we can see the way they're pushing on here, and there are two Australian riders out front, like two powerhouses. If you allow them to take 7 or 8 minutes and left them into the last 40 kilometres with 3.5, 4 minutes, you would have a lot of work, and a lot of teams would need to get working strongly on the front to get them back, because they are two real animals, as they say in biking terms.
Big strong men, and ever vigilant. The peloton is. It's certainly lined out. 2.5 minutes remains the gap. Cyril Guimard is one name that's appeared on Twitter as perhaps being an equivalent to. He was a forceful personality and a very, very successful one.
Yeah, well, there's a number of them there. I suppose Guimard would be the one. Peter Post, of course, of the rally team.
Yeah.
You had Guillaume Driessens, who was, the Belgian guy who looked after a lot of riders through his time, and Freddie Martins for a big number of years.
Jan Raas.
As many other riders. And then Raas, of course, of more recent, when he retired, he went into management, but that was pretty short-lived. He did a number of years, and then he just got out, and got totally out, actually. Talking about Raas, we never see him at the races now, where there's so many of the ex-professionals that they come to some of the events, or they're involved in some way in the cycling world.
He's not involved. Any idea what he's up to at all? He's just disappeared in cycling terms.
I have heard that he goes to his local every day, plays cards and drinks beer, and that's it.
Maybe he has it right. Nadia Gavazzi.
He gets tired of that as well, drinking every day.
Yeah.
As we know.
Speak for yourself.
Vitel.
I'm not even going to find out. He added hurriedly. Bulgak there ahead of Nadia Gavazzi. Bulgak of the Lotto Belisol team, and the diminutive figure of Androni Giocattoli's Mattia Gavazzi. Parallel on a big gear. And there's the traditional costume of the locals. Few legionnaires there, yeah. When in Rome, or at least reasonably close to it.
Pasta must be good stuff.
Dress as the locals do, yeah. Bobridge on the front. Cameron Murph taking a brief respite, and these riders making decent progress. Still 62.5 kilometres to go. A minute for every 10 kilometres means they're well within touching distance for the peloton, but they're doing a good, strong job and maintaining this advantage, and they're not making it too easy for the peloton to chase them, that's for sure. Favourite colours in the peloton? Well, Vinny Fantini is the suggestion of Greg Anderson. On Twitter, at DQ Sport, by the way, is the handle. Vinny Fantini suggests he just likes it for the overt use of Dayglow. No, I think the Team Blanco is probably the favourite one. I suppose it's ironic, really, because they don't currently have a sponsor as a result of the... there you go. Had a look at Blanco's colours. I think they're a great choice. Not sponsored at the moment. Rabobank pulled out at the end of last year as a result of all the problems and bad publicity associated with the demise of Lance Armstrong. And that team have plenty of wins so far this year, so let's hope they're able to come up with a sponsor, and let's hope that sponsor hangs on to their cool colours. Bulgak feeling the efforts of his long time spent out front yesterday. A shot too of Roberto Ferrari, a potential sprinter for Lampre Merida today in the pink colours. He was to the right of Bulgak just a few moments ago, and Roberto Ferrari made a name for himself with an extraordinary hook on Mark Cavendish in last year's Giro d'Italia, for which he was a little bit slow to apologise. Did apologise eventually, and Cavendish isn't too quick to accept it, I think. But Ferrari hasn't shown the sort of pace that he showed last year in the sprints. Whether he can get up there today, he'll certainly be the Lampre's go-to guy. Lampre Merida team. All eyes, of course, on Michele Scarponi as their overall contender, and Ferrari is the man that might be able to do a job for them at the conclusion today. Other potential sprinters, Degenkolb we mentioned, of course. Daniele Benavi of Team Saxo Tinkoff, spoken about before the start of the Giro as a potential winner of the points jersey, someone who could do a job on some of the days that the specialist sprinters couldn't make it. He's got a good turn of pace. Viviani, of course, of the Cannondale Pro Cycling team. Disappointing, I think, for Viviani yesterday. He got caught up in the crash as well, but he wasn't too far back behind John Degenkolb when Degenkolb got his foot back in and then gunned it for the line with, about 800 metres to go. And Degenkolb just powered away, and Viviani not able to go for that length of time. Maybe just got the one kick. And would have needed some sort of a lead out to get up to, or someone else to drag him up to Degenkolb if he was going to be able to produce a sprint. So it's a little bit worrying for him, but so far he's managed to pick up sprint points ahead of Mark Cavendish twice today. So obviously feeling relatively fresh. Darren Hilliard says, I see the team still drink Coke during the race. Surely there are better ways of getting nutrients nowadays. They just metabolize sugars so quickly that while it's not necessarily the best thing, and there are probably better ways, a little treat like that is not really going to have huge implications for them. But one wonders whether it's perfectly good for them, but you can't be a monk all the time, can you?
No, and of course they do take what they need in the isotonic drinks through the drinking bottles as they go through the feed station. You get in your Musette, you get 2 bottles normally, one of water and one of an isotonic drink, and also in the feed bag, in the Musette as they call it, you get a small can of Coke. And it's just a change really, because it's nice to get something nice and cool when it's warm conditions, especially. And it's only when it's warm in the earlier part of the season when the weather is cold and that they don't use the Coke as much. But it's just to change the change of taste really, but it's not really anything to do for energy wise that they take the Coke. It's just that it tastes really good. Something different to the relentless energy drinks and water. And yes, Tom Bourne says, not sure about my favourite kit. My favourite shoes in the Peloton have to be Samuel Sanchez's Gold Cities, and he does have these incredibly bright gold shoes, even more gold, I think, than when he was Olympic champion, as the riders make their way across this little section of cobbles. Shouldn't be too much of a worry. There's not too much urgency in the Peloton, so hopefully they're all going to be able to make it through okay without any mechanical issues. Or one of the motorbikes has fallen. If we just had a question in, what are the sanctions for the motorcyclists if they impede the riders or get involved at all? Well, that was I don't think that was one of the motorbikes on the race, or certainly wasn't one of the officials' bikes. I think we'll get a look at it here. Has to be. Yeah, it is one of the officials' bikes. Too much handbrake. Oh, just got on the gas a little bit. Well, those scooters, they put down a lot more power than they used to. And the riders get around. Oh, gosh, I hope they're okay. Yes, everybody's around. Well, I hope there was no harm done there, and at least the riders weren't going, as they like to say these days, full gas. Full gas was into that scooter there for a couple of moments. That's a little bit of an embarrassing moment. Caught on replay. Yeah, indeed. 2 minutes and 14 seconds the gap, so it's looking a little bit nervous now for Bobridge and Worf up front. Will the Peloton throttle back a little bit to continue the metaphor and allow those 2 riders to have their head and move out front a little bit? The Omega Pharma Quick-Step team on the front again are doing the work. Join us after these. There's the scene over Puglia as they head towards Margherita di Savoia.
billiard table flat for the most part this stage. Giro, you might say, is turning for home with a day on the Adriatic coast. It's looping inwards now from the coast to approach the finishing line, the finishing town, I should say, of Margarita de Savoia from the southwest. Then the riders will complete 2 laps of a 16.6 kilometre circuit as we get a little replay of the help that the riders give each other by indicating the hazard ahead. They've got to move into the right-hand side to avoid the end of the Armco. I always think it's... I hate to see an Armco barrier just not disappearing into the concrete. It always looks a little bit safer than when it's... when you just have the end of it. It looks very vulnerable and dangerous. The riders are vulnerable.
They're being a little bit more careful because if you go to the wrong side of the barrier, as we see down back at the feed station, the 3 riders. So I think they'll be a little bit more careful at this point.
Yeah, they've learned the hard way. 2 riders up front. Jacques Bobridge of the Blanco team, second in line here. Cameron Worth up front in the green colours of Cannondale. Both of these riders not overall contenders, but the 2 Australians capable of generating decent power. In fact, you know, we expect every day an early breakaway. Not everyone understands why this happens, but it is the pattern of professional cycling, particularly on flat stages, that a group will go out front, they'll get the telly time, and but they have to work hard at it. And you know, it's tough for them that there are only 2, and it's surprising that they didn't manage to get a few more teams involved.
Yes, well, they always would be hoping that there'd be more riders in the breakaway, and you know, you need that 6 or 8 riders to share the pace setting on the front, and you know, you spare a lot of energy as well, because with 2 out front, you have to, you know, give so much more effort, and your ride on the front, your pull on the front comes up very quickly. If you have 6 or 8 riders, you get a much longer recovery time and you know, more manpower. It's certainly, you know, in a better situation. But I think the sprinters teams are making the calculation today, trying not to leave too many riders get away, and it looks like, you know, it has worked out for those teams very well.
Corey Southern asking, why do only some riders wear skin suits during a regular stage? Regular jerseys are getting tighter and tighter, so the aerodynamic disadvantage of wearing a regular jersey, which has sort of been noted in recent years and has led to some riders wearing skin suits, well, it's less of a penalty than it was. To be honest, I think skin suits are a great idea. Was it Johan van Summeren a few years ago in Paris-Roubaix? It was the big tweak for the Garmin team. He had his skin suit with the pockets on the back. It seems like a pretty good solution to me. Separate jerseys and shorts are just handier for everyone in everyday cycling, though, aren't they? In terms of washing and keeping kit organised. You know, if a jersey gets dirty and the shorts are still usable, it's if you're a regular cyclist, skin suits are maybe a little bit too much. For a pro cyclist, I think they're a pretty good idea. Tradition. It's sometimes difficult to beat tradition, and if the tradition says wear jerseys, then it'll be a long time before it changes. People have been wearing skin suits in road stages since the mid-80s, on and off. It's happened. There was a famous stage that Stephen Roach actually won in the 84-85 Tour de France, and it was a split stage. I think it was quite a short stage anyway, so he wasn't going to have to carry a lot of food, or any food. He arrived at the start line in a skin suit, and everyone laughed at him, and of course he went off and won the stage. Maglia Rosa group. Luca Paolini it is who's wearing that Maglia Rosa in his first Giro d'Italia at the venerable age of 36 years of age. The man from Katusha carries the 17-second advantage over Rigoberto Urán. Paolini, well, it's been a very successful day for him. The Katusha is starting to mass towards the front to keep Paolini out of trouble. One big difficulty for them tomorrow, in terms of it's a choppy old stage for them. It's going to be difficult. It might be a little bit more difficult to defend it if one of the other riders in the top 10, who's perhaps a little bit less concerned with the time trial the following day. Perhaps an opportunity for Beñat in Šausti to at least spend one day in Maglia Rosa. He's currently third overall at 25 seconds. It's hard to imagine he'd be able to get up the road ahead of the Katushas and Paolini, but he might fancy his chances of at least trying.
Well, I think there will be a lot of action in that final of the stage tomorrow. You know, it's a very undulating and a difficult stage, but Paolini, he can do that quite well. The shorter climbs, you know, he's good in that. It's the long climbs where he will get into difficulty. You know, when it goes to 8 kilometres plus, well, then he gets into big difficulty. But the short ones, I think he'll be able to manage. So unless there's a breakaway and it will not be controlled, I don't think that in the final we should see too much problems. But you never know, because as we said in the earlier part of our programme, earlier part of the week, it's his first time riding the Giro, which is a big surprise. And you know, it's sometimes it can be difficult for a rider like that to adapt, you know, to the number of days racing. So we'll have to wait and see. But the terrain, it should normally, you know, be manageable for him.
So Katusha have had plenty to ride for the last few days. Vincenzo Nibali, of course, lying in fourth place, is the first of the very serious overall contenders. Rigoberto Urán you could probably include in that list, although he'll be very much riding in the service of Bradley Wiggins throughout the 3 weeks. But if Wiggins was to strike any sort of difficulty, then the Sky Pro Cycling team could certainly have a pretty good backup in the shape of Rigoberto Urán. And there's the salt flats of Margherita di Savoia, formerly known as the Commune di Saline, in deference to the fact that this is one of the biggest salt producers. It's 20 kilometres long, that something like 7 kilometres wide. One of the biggest salt producers in Europe. So you can be pretty sure that almost any meal that you have, you know, almost any meal that anyone has in Italy, that's for sure, has Margherita di Savoia to thank in some small way. Matthew Harley-Goss there, just lifting his hands off the bars in the middle of the group as the riders hit 50 kilometres to go. Just over 30 miles for the two riders out front and for the Peloton racing behind in stage 6 of Giro d'Italia. 1 minute and 37 seconds their advantage. I don't think the Peloton would be too keen to actually get them back too early, Sean.
No, I don't think there's any worry about that. They're just allowing them to hang out there. We can see, you know, a minute 38 at the moment, just inside the 50 kilometres, and yeah, they were allowed out to over 4 minutes, but that was quickly rectified. And you know, at 100 kilometres, there was, you know, around the 2.5 minutes. So yeah, they really have, you know, kept a lid on it. And we can see there are times when there was the intermediate sprints and the Peloton started up the pace a bit. The gap came down very quickly, but they're allowing it to grow out again, and they're just holding at that 1.5, 2 minutes, and they know that that is the best way to do it, because everybody back in the Peloton is, you know, calm at the moment. If you pull them back too early, of course, they're into the situation. There will be riders who want to go in the attack and breakaways trying to get away again. So this is really, you know, calming down the race, and with two riders in front, it's just an easy day for the sprinters teams. They'll, you know, keep riding like this, and they'll try and leave these guys get into the last 20k, I would say, and then, you know, when the pace starts going up, riders looking for positions and teams position their leaders, then the gap will, you know, come down, because it will automatically go up because of that reason, the tempo on the front of the bunch.
Laurent Pichon continuing to do solid stir. A crash and problems, and this will happen as Brian Bulgak, it is, of the Lotto Belisol team, that goes down, and he's got a front wheel puncture. Looks like difficulty too. Yep, it's Brian Bulgak has come to grief. One of the Orica Green Edge riders also in difficulty. Sven Tuft, well, it's his birthday today, 36 years of age. Was just about to give him a name check, and Sven Tuft has had, well, he's got the first of his 36 bumps in not exactly the ideal fashion. Bulgak just sitting on the ground going, oh God, what happened there? Doesn't look like too much harm done, although he is going to have to get a new tyre. A new front wheel, I should say, because of that punctured tyre.
We could see Taylor Finney also there. He was close of crashing into somebody. He stopped at the very final moment.
Well, I suppose riding along at the back, you're going to get caught behind stuff, but if you ride along at the very, very back, you can obviously leave that extra couple of inches and you have a better chance of getting stopped. But you get delayed by that, and that's one of the difficulties with riding along at the back. And it's a quick change for Brian Bulgak as soon as his team mechanic gets to him. Interestingly enough, the commissars issued notice today that they would be checking on the so-called lyre tabs in today's stage, ahead of today's stage, and reminding the riders that the ergo de fourche, as they're called, those little lugs at the bottom of the forks, must not be tampered with. It's a controversial new rule, and they said they'd be checking them today. I mean, I think it's a bit of a crazy rule in professional cycling at this point. Those tabs down the bottom are for to make sure that the wheel doesn't fall out if the quick release skewer hasn't been adjusted correctly, and to make sure that at least you know, the rider of the vehicle won't have any problems. But in fairness, in professional cycling, they know exactly how to fit a skewer. So maybe had some application in amateur racing or amateur events, but in professional cycling, it just makes the wheel change a bit longer if you have to wind the skewer every time instead of having it adjusted and set for the fork, you know, just before you go for the change.
Well, it's the regulation is if the bike is manufactured with that on the end of the fork, well, then you cannot touch it. But if it's not on the fork, so of course, you know, a lot of the teams can get the forks made. But for a safety point of view, for the normal people, leisure cyclists and that, because there is a lot of people, and from my experience, you know, when we do these biking holidays down in Mallorca, you do a bike maintenance, and you know how to repair a bike, how to change a puncture, all of that. And some people, they don't know how to lock up the wheel, the quick release thing. They just keep on tightening until it's rock tight. So I think for that reason, maybe in the front, it's important because of that reason.
Yeah, well, the rule is you don't have to have lower tabs if they weren't originally fitted to the fork. You just have to maintain the fork as it was originally manufactured. Of course, if you happen to file them off and then repaint your fork, it would be very difficult to test that. But I presume these manufacturers of all these protein bikes are able to come up with a fork straight from the factory that doesn't have the lower tabs, make life a little bit easier for everyone. Front of the peloton, the pace is being set by Française Déjà, aided by Omega Pharma Quickstep. Just under 1.5 to those riders up front. How much longer will they hang on? Find out after these. Well, the fans are getting excited, donning the pink, the rosa. A little bit of road furniture for the peloton to negotiate coming up very shortly. No difficulty whatsoever with the two riders out front. But this gap is coming down very quickly indeed. Is it likely they'll let it ramp up a little bit? You know, they need to give them another 30 seconds or so. They seem to be closing it down a little bit earlier than might be comfortable for them. Will it lead to an opportunity perhaps for another team or another breakaway attempt?
Well, I think it's difficult, you know, if it's still a minute of an advantage to two men out in front, it's always difficult to, you know, go across that quite a big gap. So I don't think there'll be anybody really trying it, and the peloton will probably just slow it down a little bit again when they feel that, you know, there's getting close to the group. Anything inside a minute will be getting too close.
Calling for Greg Bull of Vacances Soleil. Working away at his was he just doing the quick release? Looks like he's on camp bike, so it'd be on the brake lever, or is it some sort of a problem at the rear brake? Looks like he's going to get a bike. Maybe he felt the brake was rubbing. Could well be that he's got a problem with his wheel, broken spoke. Either way, no harm done. He's able to pick up a bike without any difficulty, and presumably shouldn't have any difficulty getting back in there reasonably quickly. PMC at the back. It's a good way to get on television, I suppose. Get the sponsor's name on there if you put a rider on the back all the time. Steve Cummings, he's been up towards the front, minding Cadel Evans for much of the stage. Now he's down towards the rear. Contrast in Giro headgear for Garmin Sharp riders. Okay. And the leading contenders starting to mass towards the front as we get another sight of these extraordinary salt flats at Margherita di Savoia. Comune di Saline, as it was formerly known, up as far as 1879, then changed its name in honor of Margherita Maria Teresa Giovanna of Savoy, to give her her full title. And she's the same Margherita that gave her name to the pizza, the Margherita, created by a Neapolitan, dedicated to her. It had the red tomato, the white mozzarella, the green basil toppings. Pizza in the colours of the Italian tricolore. And there'll be pizza for the winner tonight, perhaps. Maybe a slice, maybe a sliver. Don't hold with that sort of behaviour, Sean, no? Not even if you win a stage.
And what about the wine?
So yeah, it's either the pizza or the champagne. You know, which do you go for? Something in the order of 550,000 metric tons of salt are produced in this region around this town every year. There's a lot of salt.
And it's not a nice area if the weather conditions is not good for bike racing, because we can see very, very open here. Today it's very little wind, and the bit is there seems to be like a headwind, but if you had a side wind on these roads, well, then it would be, you know, very aggressive racing, and it would be very nervous times for everybody. So, you know, conditions today are really good, but not a nice part of Italy when the weather conditions are not right.
Well, we have that a repeat of what we saw the other day, as the two riders out front. Cameron Wurf here is collecting plenty of bottles. Why is that? He's still away. He doesn't need all those bottles. He's got bottles in his cage. He's okay. No, he's collecting them for the team, because when he's picked up, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a whole lot longer now, then he'll at least be at the front of the group, and the other riders are going to be able to grab a bottle on the way. So that's it's convenient, it's handy, it's no real extra effort for him. Meanwhile, David Miller is back at the Garmin Sharp team car. He's got to do it the other way. He's collecting bottles, and he's got to work his way up through the bunch. The pace is starting to pick up there. He's won a stage of the Giro, of course, and said he absolutely felt he had to be part of this team this year. Missed out on being part of Ryder Hagedal's wonderful success 12 months ago. The Scotsman in the twilight of his career, but still capable of producing wonderful performances. Today his job is to try and keep Ryder Hagedal out of trouble.
Yes, and doing a count there, he put 3 down the back of his jersey, 2 in his pocket and 2 in his bottle, so 7 bottles there very quickly. So he's pretty much going to look after everybody with a fresh bottle.
He's done the team, yeah. And presumably if he's picked up all those bottles, he actually wants to be able to get them to the riders at a time when they're actually going to be able to use them, you know. So, I mean, they don't really want the bottles in the last 20k. They kind of want them 30, 40k to go, don't they?
Yes, well, now is the moment to go back, of course, because within the last 20k, you cannot take a bottle from the car. That is the regulation. So, you know, we're getting to that zone now where you top up with bottles, and then you come back through the peloton, and it's going at a good old rate at the moment, but it will start to, hot up a bit more, and you have to try and get it done before it really starts to race up front of the peloton, because then it becomes a difficult one to distribute them to all your teammates. So experience there, I think, as well. You know, the guys, you just you do it at a good moment, and of course Miller would have vast experience, and at this time it's the real good time to do that.
A sign of Rubiano on the back of the peloton for Androni, as up front Française de Jeux set the pace and do the work. Let's run through the runners and riders, the contenders for victory today. Omega Pharma Quickstep obviously believe that Mark Cavendish can deliver for them. Française de Jeux have done lots of work, so big onus of responsibility on Nasser Bouhanni to see can he come up with a victory. For Garmin Sharp, Robbie Hunter might fancy his chances, but is unlikely to have a lead-out train. Presumably most of the team will be dedicated to looking after Ryder Hagedal. Ellie Viviani of Cannondale, of course, will be a leading contender. And Cameron Worth up front in the breakaway all day has at least given the Cannondale team, the rest of the Cannondale team behind, the day off, so they've had no responsibility for chasing it. And Viviani has had free ride along with the rest of the team. Daniel Oss of the BMC team perhaps will fancy his chances. Roberto Ferrari of Lampre Merida, this would be a good time for him to come up with a result. Sight there of Michele Scarponi, their leading contender. He's now 1 minute and 23 seconds down after losing time a few days ago. 21st overall, but Scarponi. Oh, and crash, and well, on that right-hander. Bunch just starting to condense. There's a couple of BMC riders caught up. We see a couple of movie stars as well. Vacansoleil are involved.
Cobo once again.
Yeah, Eros Kopecky there. We see Juan Jose Cobo. Was he in there? But not his first issue of this race. Mattia Catienio. And riders picking up wheels, and Eros Kopecky takes in a little bit of a time to get going. Should be able to get back in there, you would have hoped. Stefano Garzelli as well for Vinny Fantini, the oldest man in the race, former winner of Giro d'Italia way back in 2000. And Garzelli now has a job to get back into contention inside the final 25 miles. And just all condensed on the right-hand side. Touch of wheels, and they go down like skittles. Rubiano, that I mentioned, was delayed. That's Ignatenko of the Katusha squad. Petr Ignatenko gets a bike and gets back and going, but well, he's got a long chase, and the pace is starting to pick up. That's a little bit of extra energy that he didn't need to be expending. And it's not a gimme to get back in at this stage of affairs. Up front, Cameron Worth and Jack Bobridge continue to do their work. Resigned to their fate, having a little chat and a smile between the two Aussies. They're delighted with what they've managed today as they look over their shoulders to see where the peloton are. Well, there's the peloton. No real urgency up front. No doubt they'll be aware they'd have heard the crash behind, but they won't be directing any of their attention towards it, just slogging away. Those riders from Française de Jeune, Amiga Pharma, Quick-Step will be made aware if there's any difficulty for any of their teammates, but well, to be honest, most of them are up front. It didn't look like either of those teams were involved, so they'll continue to set the pace as we see Domenico Pozzovivo was caught, the diminutive climber. And he doesn't need to be left in a situation where he's out in the wind on a flat stage and trying to grind his way back up through the cars. A couple of teammates come back to help him out. It's Betancourt, the Colombian, and another Colombian rider from the Colombian team there. Ospina Navarra. And here are our two breakaway riders. It's been a great effort from them. They've been out front for a long time, but they've done their work, and they will leave it up to the sprinters teams to set it up in the remaining 36.5 kilometres. Jack Bobridge and Cameron Worth will have tired legs tonight, but they'll feel contented with what they've managed and what they've achieved. So now we see a little bit of medical attention for Garzelli. Oh, that stings a bit. Not wearing mitts, whether he took it off to get that attention. Has he got one on the left? He does, okay. Yeah, sometimes you see riders without mitts, and I just think that's nuts, really, because when you go down, you put your hand out, you can get a lot of gravel into into the palm of your hand quite easily. Not much protection on the back of your of a mitt though, so Garzelli, a little bit of pain there, but nothing that's going to cause him any lingering and lasting effects. That's the 3 kilometre to go sign, because very shortly we're on the circuits now. On the left-hand side, you see Luca Paolini being squeezed a little bit by those 3 Team Blanco riders in black, white and blue. Paolini in the distinctive pink, as we saw. Got another shot there of Mark Cavendish right in the centre. Garzelli back at the Vinnie Fantini car. He'll take on a bottle. Going to go without mitts. He's taken off the left-hand mitt. We might as well leave the left-hand one on. Well, some suggestions. Well, the question is, are Cav's team doing too much to be able to deliver him for the sprint too? And this has been the question all year long, really. In fairness, they tend to only use 1 or 2 riders, and then the remaining riders are there in the service of Mark Cavendish. They're not about the overall, they're all about sprint wins. So that shouldn't really be the issue. The issue should be getting organised and managing to stay out front of the other teams and do it right through to the final few hundred metres, when they can deliver Cavendish into the best possible position. They did say after the first stage that they didn't have a problem with a couple of the other teams taking it up, because they only had 3 riders each, Orica Greenedge and Vinnie Fantini, and they weren't going to be able to dominate it on either of those teams. And it was just the crash meant that we didn't see a totally clean finish, and we didn't really see whether Amiga Pharma Quickstep were going to get properly organised for that. The crash put pay to that. Also, of course, that little mechanical issue for Gert Stegemans, which is another issue indeed. Tony Meader wants to know if Sean was racing nowadays, what sort of tactics would you employ against Cavendish? Sean, you tended to do your own thing in the gallops more often than not. How do you get in amongst Cav's sprint train? How do you disrupt it? How do you manage to get a lead?
Well, it's difficult to do anything against Cavendish when he gets a real good lead out, and the team does a good job from him, taking to the point where he's unbeatable. You know, at 200 metres to go, if he's really taken with a train to that, but then you cannot. Very, very difficult to beat Cavendish on the flat run-ins. Yesterday, of course, the opportunity there, where it's, you know, a difficult final. Well, then that's where you can get rid of him by putting the pace high on the climbs, and it just automatically happens. As the train yesterday, you know, it kicked up a bit, as we see one of the Sky Wiggins there having a change. Did he have a mechanical?
So problem for Bradley Wiggins.
Seems to be a bike change,
and he's not too long in picking up Konstantin Siutsu. It did look like a bike change, didn't it?
Well, he hasn't got his bike frame number at the moment, so that says that he made a quick bike change.
Okay, well, there's not too much urgency for the bunch, and they're not going to try and take advantage of that, so presumably Bradley Wiggins has the whole team around him. Sometimes they say, well, it makes more sense to let the rider ride solo up through the cars and then pick him up when he gets to the back of the bunch, and those riders can bring him up through. But the Sky team have decided that they've got the firepower and have no difficulty in pacing Bradley Wiggins right up through the group, and that, you'd have to say, would make sense in this kind of a situation. Different if the race was full on, or if Wiggins was that much stronger that he was going to drop a whole load of climbers that came back for him, but that's not going to happen here. And other riders hitting difficulty. Lotte Belisal car pulled over on the right-hand side as the riders come through the finishing line for the first time. This their first sight of the finishing line, and reasonably wide, but not that wide, and plenty of opportunity. Another crash, so another big delay. It's going to cause Bradley Wiggins a bit of difficulty as well, because he's going to happen upon this very shortly, as we see riders from Bardiani down on the ground. Pelazzotti gets up and is managing to recover, and they're clambering over the top of each other, and I suppose this indicates, well, it's not all that wide at all, and any sort of difficulty coming to the finish is going to cause huge difficulties. There's Bradley Wiggins in the middle, stopped still, wondering will he ever be able to get back in racing. And this is moments of anxiety for the Sky team, because there are big gaps developing, as we see Pelazzotti in his Italian national champions jersey. Riders looking over their shoulder to see what other riders are behind coming up. Domenico Pozzovivo was one of those that was delayed. And there are big gaps there. And riders still... lots of wheels. Oh, and Wiggins is still there. This is a big, big problem. This could cause Bradley Wiggins to lose significant time because he is faced now with a very, very significant chase. And it's just one big, huge traffic jam in Giro d'Italia. And it's incredible that they can't manage to find some sort of a way through. Riders getting on the block.
Looking for a bike or a wheel there, and it's just mayhem here. The road is totally blocked. There's at least 25 riders must be tangled together there at the moment on their bikes.
Well, Katusha have gone to the front. They're drilling it for Luca Paolini as much to keep him out of trouble as anything else. But, well, the question is, will they try and take advantage of this crash for the other riders? Racing is racing, and they just make it. They're trickling through in ones and twos. It's the most enormous and surprising roadblock that's caused their physical issues for Lee Howard of the Orica Green Edge team.
Posato, Visconti we see also there, still on the side of the barrier and trying to get his bike organised, and it's going to be interesting to see, will they continue out front? We see Katusha pushing on here, but I'd be not surprised if they just knock it off a bit, because
there's so many teams
and so many riders. But again, they're getting into the final. It hasn't been racing that fast, and we can see now that Katusha are just rolling on the front, is really not up the pace. If anything, they've knocked it down a bit, and we can see some teams coming here, Radio Shack, and I think we will see more of that, and we will see them really slowing down.
So Katusha have decided to stall it a little bit, and that should let most of these riders back on reasonably quickly. Interesting opportunity. I mean, Luca Paolini, one would presume, is not going to be in the pink jersey beyond the time trial, but here was an opportunity to get in ahead of a few of the leading contenders. Would you have taken advantage of that situation? I mean, for Katusha, there obviously was a reason to ride.
Well, it's a situation that we had a lot of debate over in the past, and the Tour of France and other races. But I think the way they're rolling along at the moment of the crash, let's say, it was just at a pace, and they just continued at that, and they seem to be continuing at the moment to the same pace. They're certainly not up to it. If anything, it might have been slowed down. We did see some riders come to the front, as we see Française de Joux just continue to roll on here. And if they continue on that pace, still with 30 kilometres to go, we should be able to see a lot of the riders getting back in. Heidel there having a talk with one of his teammates, and they're looking about now to see who's actually missed it here, and there's a lot of the favourites, I think, still back the road there, and Bradley Wiggins was the one was unfortunate because he was coming back from a mechanical and lost quite a bit of time because of the crash. And just amazing, just the road was totally blocked and no way through. Even by carrying your bike over your head, it wasn't possible to get through.
There's rider Hejidal wearing number 1, the reigning champion of Giro d'Italia, and he's got company from Christian van der Veld, so at least he's got someone, although there's quite a few from his team a long way back. There's not more than 40 riders in that group, so 3/4 of the peloton have been caught in that huge logjam. Française de Joux have decided to stall it. Christian Canes comes to the front, just wants to knock it off, and it looks as if these riders have decided that there is no advantage, real advantage to be taken from this situation, and that it will be a relief for Wiggins, because I think it's still going to take him a little while to get back in here.
Yes, it will take a bit of time, but there's so many riders back there, and we could see Wiggins as well. He had a lot of teammates, and there's a lot of riders, a lot of teams will want to ride because of their classification men being back there. So I think we will see a very big group coming up quickly. We could see Dominic Roland there from FDJ. He was calling there to the rider in the front of Française de Joux. Just he was pointing back. There's been a crash there, so slow it down a bit. But it's not really knocking off a lot. They continue roughly at the same pace as it has been before the crash.
Well, I couldn't see Bouhanni in there, so if Nasser Bouhanni isn't there, there's not much incentive for Française de Joux to continue to ride. Presumably they'll be on the radio pretty quickly as the groups try to get organised to chase back on, and this is the danger for the leading contenders, and this is why they try to get up front on what a lot of people will call a sprinter stage. They're going to leave it to the Sky team, to the Sky Pro Cycling squad. Bradley Wiggins himself is going to contribute to the chase. Salvatore Puccio now on domestic duties, Gregario duties after his day in the Maglia Rosa a few days ago. And they're just riding a steady tempo. Bradley Wiggins still looking comfortable, so no sense of massive urgency about it, but it's a worrying moment, isn't it? Bradley Wiggins, of course, was coming back. He had a mechanical issue, so you can't really be blamed for having made any mistake. He just encountered this huge big roadblock in front of him and stood patiently, stoically, waiting for it to clear. Katusha on the front, on the right-hand side, somewhere nestled in just behind them will be Maglia Rosa of Luca Paolini. And groups behind, there is a sense of urgency in that group. Are they in front of the Wiggins group or behind it? Because there are groups all over the road. And the AG2R squad, led by Hubert Dupont, who was on the attack yesterday, frantically trying to get back on terms, and they're about to make the juncture, so no problems for them.
They have their general classification, and Betancourt is in that group. We could see him there about 8 or 10 position further down, so there's a bit of urgency there, and there will be a bit more urgency when you're in a small group of 10 or 12 riders. Then it's going to be a little bit worrying time, as we can see here. A big group getting back is it's going to be the case for quite a long time. We will see these groups of 10, 15 riders making their way into the main peloton.
Well, massive efforts being made by those riders to get back on. They'll see the group now, and a huge relief. Hubert Dupont has done his work. A couple of Movistar team riders in those dark colours. The Vini Fantini rider just behind has to make an effort to close the gap, but they're back onto the group, and great relief for them as they work their way across the salt flats. Join us for the next part. Yeah, on the start finish straight, so it just shows you the potential for problems in this in the finish that they have presented for us in Margherita di Savoia today.
Yes, and we can see there's some of the Orica Green Edge riding there also. We see Luke Dunbridge, and also Lancaster was also contributing with the Sky Riders, and they're coming back very quickly. But we can see the Française de Giro are still pushing. They have Bonhami up here. He's still in this group, and the leading group. So, the Française de Giro didn't knock it off totally. They're just going to make it that little difficult for the riders to get back. I think the sprinters, that's what they're really thinking of. The sprinters have been back there. They'll have to, push on, because we can see the way the Sky is in a very big group. The Sky team are pushing on at a fast pace, and a lot of riders are in a little bit of difficulty here. We can see it's almost one line behind them at the moment, and I'm not surprised, because we can see they are going at twice the speed of the peloton almost. And good tactic by Française de Giro, but because they were making the pace for a long time. They've been making for kilometre after kilometre a day, and they've just continued at the same pace as they were doing before the crash occurred.
Well, the tweets are coming in thick and fast to at DQ Sport. One of the Androni Giocattoli riders is vaulted back into contention. Luckily, that mechanic didn't get in the way of the Sky squad as they go about their business now within 20 seconds. But nobody can understand, Sean. It is difficult to try to understand why the likes of Katusha wouldn't push on and try and prevent those riders from getting back on and take advantage of that delay.
Well, I don't think for Katusha and the position they're in at the moment, they're not going to gain anything, and Paolini is in a position at the moment where he's going to hold on to his jersey, and by doing that, he's not a general classification man for the end of this race, and for that reason, well, there's no interest. They just want to hold on the jersey for another day, and I think they haven't been really riding on the front, so if they put men up on the front and start pushing on the pace, they will have a lot of enemies back in the bunch, and that's not what they want at the moment. And you always have to make take into consideration what was happening before the crash, and that's the way you decide the tactic from there on. And the way the race was going before the crash, it wasn't really on. Luckily for the riders who were back there, Wiggins and co and the other favourites, because if it was really racing at full speed, well then with that big crash they would have lost quite a lot more time. It would be a more difficult situation to get back in there.
Christian Canis working his way back on, and well, he's done a good job, fair play, as the teams are starting to get organised to the front. The pink colours of Lampre very visible on the right hand side, and they'll be trying to get organised for Roberto Ferrari, who's nestling in there fourth in line of those pink Lampre riders. Omega Pharma Quickstep have picked it up on the front, and Sky still not quite there, but in amongst the cars. It won't take them long now. It's just about done, so that little moment of worry is almost complete. Of course, they've got to work their way back up through the group now, which is easier said than done on these narrow roads. But that's a scare for them, and they'll definitely want to try and work their way to the front of the group. Astana squad, and is that Aru of the Astana team leading the young riders classification. I mentioned them all day. Indeed, Aru, Visconti, Palini lead all 4 of the major classifications, the ones that have jerseys for them anyway. So good days for Italy at the moment, and Sky make it to the front without too much bother. Garzelli makes it up after his little medical dramas earlier. Minor medical dramas, I might add. Gianluca Brambilla of the Amiga Pharma Quick-Step team still has legs to do a job towards the front of the group. And it's Sky that have decided to pick it up, and that really was a worry. Danny Pate goes to the front. And they'll sit right on the front, and several teams will get themselves in line astern, setting an equal tempo alongside each other. You see the Blanco squad on the left-hand side. Robert Hessink is the man that they want to keep out of trouble. Ryder Hejadal as well on his own. Just has Christian van der Velde, a few riders behind him, but Hejadal perhaps trying to take advantage of the little cocoon that has been enveloped around Bradley Wiggins, and he sits on Wiggins' wheel. And it's a good idea for Hejadal. He knows there's a nice tempo being set there, and his Garmin team not really able to support him in the same way. Incredible how closely professional riders ride together. Mark Cavendish we see in the centre of our screen wearing number 151 for Amiga Pharma Quick-Step. Anxious moments for him, the tension beginning to rise.
Well, I think it was a little bit anxious, but everybody seemed quite relaxed at the back of the crash, and Bradley Wiggins was major relaxed. He was just, you know, chilling out there, standing on the road for quite a long time, and I think it was Sitsov who was kind of saying, well, we have to try and climb over this thing because it's going to take an awful long time before they all get back up and get their bikes pulled out of the pile. The stack of bikes was there, was amazing, and it's just that I suppose they could see that the racing wasn't going on ahead in the front of the bunch, and they knew that it would just continue the same. It would be, you know, very unfair if some of the teams really, you know, started up the pace when they weren't doing it already before the crash. And I think, you know, the riders that we see, Wiggins and co, who were worried about the general classification, and for a moment there they did not really panic at all, and I think they were making the calculation, you know, the kilometres you have to go to the finish, and the weight was riding before. I think when you consider that, they weren't, you know, going to be any problem for them to get back in there.
Safely in and safely right up to the front. That was impressive how quickly they got up there. They had, I suppose, a reasonably wide section of road. Wasn't too difficult for them to make it up, but still, that took some skill to do it. Amiga Pharma Quick-Step slog away, and the pattern has been reset, you would have to say, amongst the peloton as the riders are working their way up. A couple of Movistar riders still trying to get on terms. Eros Kopecky there, waiting for Ventoso. And they were about to make the juncture.
Okay.
Yeah, Leonardo Duque, we saw him at the top of the show. He's the star rider of the Colombia squad.
And a very good sprinter for a Colombian. You know, he's a rider who's quite good at this sort of finish. Not the super fast one, but still he's always thereabouts. And you know, for the moment, that's not where he likes to be, because with under 20 kilometres to go, he needs to be just up around the front and spare as much energy as possible, as we see this country.
Yeah, the leader of the mountains classification. He's been in the wars.
Yes, he was lying at the barriers for a long time. You could see he had difficulty getting back on his bike, and it seems to be that he's hurting a lot.
Well, the magic spray for Visconti, not for the first time in this race, as you can see from the bandages. A little bit of a cold spray. Hopefully we'll...
Hopefully it's as good as they have in football, because they seem to be able to do miracles in football. You see the players rolling around the pitch, and then suddenly they get this spray and they can just up and run on again.
They're usually rolling around smiling though, aren't they? Astana team on the right-hand side, and we see Vincenzo Nibali in fourth position of their 5 riders. 1 behind, riding shotgun, 4 in front. It's the perfect arrangement Omega Pharma Quick-Step it is that continue to set the pace. It's a pace matched by Sky Pro Cycling. 18 kilometres to go. It's set up for the sprinters. Sprinters teams starting to get organised as they head out on their final tour of this 16-kilometre circuit around Margherita di Savoia, and the crowds cheer. They've been here for a long time now, several hours in the baking hot sunshine in Puglia, as the riders make their appearance for the second time. Next time round, they'll really mean business. Alistair wants to know, what is Magic Spray made of? Good question. It's made of magic. Now, Katusha riders making their way to the front, but no sign of Paolini. So they work their way up on the right-hand side. Paolini instead is hanging around with a few of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step riders. And Française de Joux riders in the middle, sees a little gap and goes to work his way in through that. Now you see Paolini on the right-hand side, white helmet, pink jersey. Take the opportunity whenever he can get it to just make a little bit of progress. Pozzato looks behind. Still in the cars there. Was Pozzato back on? Looked like he was about to make the juncture. And it's Astana that take it up, perhaps. Omega Pharma Quick-Step feeling the pace a little bit, or they just don't quite want to go too early. See, this is why it's difficult. I mean, lead-out trains look easy when it works out perfectly, but when it doesn't work out perfectly, you kind of realise just what a difficult thing it is to piece together. How you have to measure your effort. We don't feel the pain as we're watching here in the commentary box, but you can be sure that every single one of those riders out there is starting to feel the lactic acid of 150 odd kilometres out racing today, and the other 5 days of racing that have preceded it. And they've got to measure their effort right the way to the finishing line to make sure, in the Omega Pharma Quick-Step's case, that it's Mark Cavendish they have in good shape. For Française de Joux, Nasser Bouhanni lurking in there in about third or fourth position behind his riders. Lampre Merida will be trying to set up Roberto Ferrari. Here is Pippo Pozzato, with a little bit of company in the shape of Christian Meyer of Orica Green Edge. It's taken him a long time to get back on, so that was not ideal for Pozzato, and that's, well, you can be sure there's plenty of other riders behind him as well.
Yes, it's interesting to see how many more riders are back there, because although Pozzato was one of the last ones, I think, to leave, we could see that he was calling for his team car. His bike seemed to be a problem, or certainly he had, a problem, mechanical problem, and he was, hanging about there for a long time, but it looks like he will make it back in. But this effort now, you can count a day over, because when you make an effort like this in this final, well then it's going to be very difficult to see him to get to the front of the bunch and have any input in the final kilometres.
Got the scientific explanation of Magic Spray from Conor McGrain. Most Magic Sprays have ethyl chloride as the main ingredient. Cools rapidly. Lee Howard of Orica Green Edge and Christian Meyer dragging themselves onto the back of the group. And one question on Twitter is, will the energy expended by the Sky team, and indeed Bradley Wiggins in particular, have any implications for them in the stages to come? Tomorrow's stage and the time trial? Not really. The speed of recovery of these riders, they won't even remember it in a couple of days' time.
No, I think they needed that today, because they haven't been having to do anything.
Good for them.
It just do them good just to get a little bit of warming up on the front of the bunch. And we see there, when the Sky team had to ride back, they went to the front of the leading part of the peloton immediately and just kept going, and it's certainly not going to have any effect on them today or in the days to come.
I'd be interested to hear their response to the comment that they needed it. They might agree with that. So some sort of order and control has been restored to the bunch. On the left-hand side, the Omega Pharma Quick-Step squad continue to set the pace. Stana's just to the right. The Euskaltel squad. Euskaltel Ascari to give them their full title. making an appearance there, very distinctive in their orange jerseys. And look at that mountain of salt off to the left-hand side. Not too many spoons now on your dinner tonight. Different for the riders, of course. Replacing the salts is an important part of their diet.
Won't need to have any salt tonight. They'll be at the breathing enough in this final 30-40 kilometres. But and we can see there on the front of the bunch, I think, and more so in all of the bunch. I think they're a little bit nervous now because we've had a few crashes in the last number of kilometres, and you know, we can see Bradley Wiggins moving up there, you know, staying with Cat 11s in his wheel, but they're all going to stay to the front here, and all the team helpers are going to be nervous because when you get a number of crashes like that, it just makes everybody a little bit nervous, and as you get into the final, you know, 10 kilometres here, they'll be just wanting to stay out of danger as much as possible. That's the reason Sky are riding here. Keep the pace high, keep Bradley Wiggins in the, you know, the top 5 or 6 of the peloton. It's the safe place to be, but you can be sure back in the bunch there's some riders, you know, starting to worry. But it's starting to line out here, as we can see. You know, we can to the right-hand side of the road. It's just a straight line of riders that tells the speed is being upped quite a lot.
Oh, and riders starting to let the wheel go towards the back. You can tell that the pace is really coming on. We're heading towards the final 10 kilometres. As we get a sight of a couple of riders that just squeezed out on the right-hand side and jumping over. One of the riders from Radio Shack right over to the right-hand side against the Armco barrier, just managing to avoid that little bit of road furniture. The Garmins set it up on the right-hand side. Their job is to try and protect. As problem for one of the Androni riders. He's going to find it difficult to get back in at this pace, I can tell you, because they're really drilling it up front. Garmin sharp on the right-hand side. Ryder Hejadal is the man that they're trying to protect and keep out front. Fabio Fellini, who finished second a couple of days ago. Not the kind of finish that he would be hoping for, and indeed this is not the kind of conclusion to the stage that he was hoping for either. It's going to be difficult for him to get back in. He's going to try for a while. Luca Paolini sitting on the back of the Garmin Sharp riders, taking advantage of the pace that they're setting. Riders bunching towards the front, trying to get involved. They're the strong ones. Further back, it's strung out in a big long line, and somebody's let the wheel go. Oh God. Just a little push from one of the Orica Green Edge riders. It'd be tougher for him to come round. Just a little nudge of encouragement, which might help that Lotto Belisol rider to stay in the wheel for just a little bit longer. Argus Shimano now looking to take responsibility. They've got John Degenkolb on a high after victory in yesterday's stage. Relieved after taking his first victory in Giro d'Italia.
Patrick Kushk pulling the pace here along. A very good time trials in his own right, and of course, yeah, he can keep the pace high, and Degenkolb definitely very much the fore here, and a lot of teams, you know, just trying to keep them in. We could see their Garmin as well. They want to keep, you know, their men up in front, and certainly, you know, the general classification, Ryder Hejadal, they have to look after him, but it'll be interesting to see in the sprint, will, you know, Robert Hunthorpe have a go here, because this is a day where one of his only chances, because another rider who really needs a pan flash in the final.
Adam Hansen feeling the pace at the back for Lotto Belisol. Now Astana take it up. Again, their main consideration is to protect Vincenzo Nibali. Nibali safely ensconced there towards the front, and it's they've seen the finish. They've seen that it's relatively narrow. It ought to be relatively straightforward. They don't have too many twists and turns within the last few kilometres, but still they realise the potential for danger at any given moment. Luca Paolini visible in the Maglia Rosa, right at the front of the peloton, staying as safe as possible. He's not looking to feature in the final sprint. He just wants to stay up to the front and make sure he's not caught behind any difficulty. If he can get to the last 3 kilometres, he should be safe in the Maglia Rosa for one more day. The riders immediately behind him in general classification. There aren't any sprinters in there. They're all leading contenders, really. Rigoberto Urán of the Sky team, Benyatin Schaust, he's 25 seconds down, Vincenzo Nibali 31, Hejidal, Wiggins, Caruso, Henao, Sant'Ambrogio and Cadel Evans. None of those riders are interested in getting involved to take the 20 seconds on offer at the end of this. Not that, well, they'd certainly be interested if they thought they could get it, but it's not really the finish to suit any of those riders, so their major consideration is just to stay out of trouble. Paolini drops it back a little bit behind Argas on the front. Astana still setting a tempo. Inside the final 7 kilometres. Movistar moving to the front. And the BMC squad of Cadel Evans also looking to see what they can do. Nasser Bohani quite a way back there, in 30th position. Zach Cavendish over on the right-hand side, one of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step riders. It's probably not Cavendish, actually. He might be a few more behind. Yeah, he's about 4th of those Omega Pharma Quick-Steps on the left-hand side. Number 1 in the Garmin Sharp. Ryder Hejidal just coming into shot at the bottom of the screen there.
You see Cavendish there being piloted by Elio Kais just in front of him, and of course the big leader man Gert Stegmans just in front of Cavendish. So there is 2 men there who are just guiding him into the final number of kilometres.
Tense moments these as the Argus riders look around themselves a little bit. They don't want to set it up too early. 6 kilometres to go. Bohani, you can see, starting to think about making his way up.
Alec Dowsett there in the middle, leading out Ventoso, of course, 148. So all the sprinters trying to keep their men and keep their position.
Bottles being jettisoned all over the place. Don't do that in your local third cat race. It's just silly. These bottles are picked up, of course, by teams that collect them after the race. That's those that might actually be left there. For the most part, they're picked up by fans of the Giro d'Italia. Sashla Modolo in there for Bardiani. Valvoli will fancy himself to produce a decent finishing kick. He's in the distinctive green jersey, the first of those Dayglow green jerseys. It looks as if he's on his own. Doesn't appear that he's got any support. The rider has got a bit of a gap. One of the Saxo Tinkoff riders. That's Boaro. Boaro was on the attack a couple of days ago, wasn't he? Or was it yesterday? I'm trying to remember. It's coming thick and fast, but Boaro's been on the attack in Giro d'Italia already. He's on the attack once more. He's got a few bike lengths advantage. To what end, one wonders. Great to see the ambition, but riders fanning to the left and to the right of the peloton. They haven't quite lit the afterburners left inside the last 5 kilometres of the 6th stage of Giro d'Italia, from Moala de Bari to Margherita di Savoia. Emanuele Boara, a brief moment out front as he's marshalled without any great difficulty by Omega Pharma Quick-Step.
Jerome Pinot who sets the place on the front, and difficult, impossible really for anybody to just go to the front of the bunch here on your own. Like there's so many teams here. Just as we go into the final 4.5 kilometres, it's very, very impossible task really for any rider, even with a group of 2 or 3, because it will just really up the pace. When the sprinters teams really set it up, the pace will just get up to 65-70 kilometres per hour on this one.
So it's the Cannondale squad on the front. Somewhere lurking in the middle of that group, we presume, is Elia Viviani, who's taken points at the intermediate sprints today and will fancy his chances of putting one over Mark Cavendish et al. In the finishing sprint. Boaro is swept up, as you might expect, but now Saxo Tinkoff riders look to try and get organised, because they've got Daniele Banati as a possible go-to man for the sprint. Française de Jeux resume at the front as they have done for so much of the day. They've done an awful lot of work. They have great belief that Nasser Bohani has what it takes to produce victory in this 6th stage of Giro d'Italia. Bradley Wiggins, wow, what a fantastic shape over a bicycle. Hours into this race, and he's able to get billiard table flat over that over those bars, and he takes it up on the front. So he got a real scare there, didn't he, in terms of time lost in the general classification. He doesn't want to get caught out as he got caught out a few days ago. He doesn't, and he got a real scare by that crash earlier, getting caught behind it, and he goes to the front, sets the tempo, makes sure that there's no stall, makes sure that he's not crowded out by a bunch of riders inside, well, 3.2 kilometers to go, so another 100 meters, and Bradley Wiggins will at least know that as long as he stays upright, or even if he doesn't stay upright, as long as he's with the group when the crash happens, that he'll get the bunch time at the conclusion. So Bradley Wiggins it is that's going to lead it out, so it's good news for all the sprinters. Nasser Bouhanni has managed to work his way up into third position. Has he gone a little bit early? Still 2,800 meters for Frances Dejeux to try and deliver Nasser Bouhanni to the finish.
And pretty much straight, of course. Is we see the final corner there just outside the 3 kilometers to go, so it's a good run in, but again, there's not really any major fast pace here for the moment. A lot of movement, and we can see here it's Sky is continuing to set the pace on the front, which is surprising. None of the other teams are taking it up for the moment, but it has to happen in the very, very near any moment now.
Yeah, we just saw Giacomo Nizzolo of Radio Shack working his way to the front on the tail of his teammate, and a late attack coming from Vacances Soleil. A surprise attack. It's marshalled, or is it marshalled? Almost, or is shut down by Michael Golas of Omega Pharma Quickstep. Vacances Soleil on the attack.
Lickard.
Surely Lickard is not going to, Pim Lickard is not going to be able to steal a march on the sprinters teams. He's got a few, well, it's a very, very impressive effort because they were going at a hell of a rate, and for him to be able to even get up off the front of the bunch was a good effort, but it's not going to last for too much longer. Great ambition being shown by Vacances Soleil and Pim Lickard, but Omega Pharma Quickstep setting a frenetic pace on the front, and aided on this occasion now by Ulrika Greenedge. Matthew Harley-Goss is their go-to man. Cannondale just behind. Elliot Viviani will be hoping that he gets a clean run to the finish. Danilo Honda will be looking after Giacomo Nizzolo. Saxo Bank Tinkoff, and they're all crowding over the top of each other. Plenty of opportunity for riders to come to grief. Mark Cavendish was on the left-hand side there looking to work his way through. And the difficulty with a long straight run, Sean, is that you don't want to launch the afterburners too early. You see the finish, and you can get out there too quickly.
You can get on the front too quickly, but again, we can see there's quite a number of teams here with a lot of riders, with Argos Shimano on the front here at the moment, or is it Frances Dejeux, but a number of teams, and we can see Steegmans there with Mark Cavendish in his wheel in a very good position at the moment.
So Argos Shimano on the front. John Degenkolb, has he gone too early? It's Mark Cavendish sitting pretty and looking very strong, just with two riders in front of him, so Argos Shimano could well have gone a little bit early. Cannondale looking around to see where Elia Viviani is. Where is Mark Cavendish sitting on the wheel of his final lead-out man with a perfect launching pad, as AG Tour looked to get involved as well. Nasser Bouhanni coming in on the right-hand side, working towards the line. Now Mark Cavendish goes inside the last 100 metres. Mark Cavendish of the Omega Pharma Quickstep team. Can he hang on ahead of Elia Viviani? And he's using every inch of every amount of energy that he's got. Mark Cavendish takes his second victory of the race. Nasser Bouhanni so disappointed he had to stall his effort in the last 100 metres, but really, would he ever have had a chance of getting past Mark Cavendish, who delivers the goods with his second victory of the race? And he's grinning wildly because he knows he had, well, he's got to pay great credit and great dues to his team. What a wonderful effort they did all day, setting the pace, and they set it up nicely, and he's absolutely thrilled, and I think he's thrilled too for the effort that he was given by his team, because they got it right today.
Yes, and Steegmans, of course, we could see there, giving him a big hug as he's just won the stage, and Steegmans, perfect position, just held off and then took up the sprint at the right moment.
Oh, and a little bit of tempers frayed at the end. Nasser Bouhanni just trying to calm things a little bit. Gavazzi seems a little bit exercised, one of the Garmin Edge riders also involved in that, but it's all smiles for Mark Cavendish, who takes the victory. Not everybody is happy at the conclusion of that stage. There's really usually only one happy person. And tempers frayed for a moment, but they calm a little.
Hunter.
Robbie Hunter, the Garmin Sharp sprinter.
Of course, yes. Two men who we don't back off at all in the sprint, and it seems to be. And we did see Gavazzi there. He was very much up in the sprint. I think he was he third, second, in the top 3 or 4 at least.
Let's get a side of this. Argus Shimano got it all wrong, launched way too early. Cavendish showed the right amount of composure. Waited as long as possible. Sits in the wheel on what perfect piece of work is done by him. And of course, with his man riding shotgun, Viviani gets going as well. Nasser Bouhanni is badly blocked out. See Mark Cavendish now being delivered perfectly. Absolutely perfect timing by him and by his team, and that will give them great confidence going into the rest of the race.
Yes, we could see Gavazzi there pulling from Hunter. He just, you know, on his right-hand side, just got a pull from him, and that's what the discussion was about just after finish.
So tempers frayed amongst the riders a little bit further behind, but nothing they could do about it. Oh, frustration for Nasser Bouhanni. He felt that he could have been up there had he managed to find a way clear a little bit earlier, but so difficult to time those. Elia Viviani just didn't quite have the pace that he might have hoped for. There's confirmation of the stage result. Cavendish gets the win.